Welcome to the Send Talk podcast, your easy to understand guide to some of the most common queries we get asked when it comes to special educational needs and disabilities, or SEND. I'm your host, Vic Elizabeth Turnbull, and together with SENDIASS Manchester, the city's information, advice and support service for SEND, we'll empower you to make informed decisions for you or your child. You'll hear from the SENDIASS Manchester team, and they'll join me online for a chat. This episode is part of our FAQ, or Frequently Asked Questions series of the Send Talk podcast. In these shorter episodes, we get straight to the point to answer the most common and very specific queries we get asked here at SENDIASS Manchester. And joining me for these episodes is Laura Nardella, an advisor at SENDIASS Manchester.
Thank you, Vic. Hi, I'm Laura. And just to let you know, for more information about everything we talk about in this episode, you can go to our website, which is sendiassmanchester.org.
Thank you so much, Laura. So the big question for this episode is, how do I check my draft EHC plan? When would you have to do this?
Everyone who has a child with an education healthcare plan will have to do this, so it is relevant to everyone with an EHC plan. And when do you have to do it? Okay, so it's when the drafts are sent out to you, and that will be either when the local authority agree to issue a new EHC plan. So your child gets their brand new plan and they'll send it out in draft form first. Or if your child already has an EHC plan, they've gone to an annual review, it's being amended, and then that amended plan will be sent out to you as draft. So there will be a letter with the draft plan, and it will say, here's your draft plan. You can check it, and you have 15 calendar days to check the plan and come back to the EHC team with your proposed amendments if there's anything that you want to change to the plan. I just wanted to say here to anyone, especially people who've had their first EHC plan, don't panic if there's no school named in section I of the plan. There's no name school. Draft plans do not have name schools. This is absolutely normal, so there's nothing missing with that, so don't be worried about it. The named school or education setting won't be included until you get the finalised plan.
Okay, so you have a draft plan and a deadline to check it. Where do you start?
Vic, there's no easy way around this. The only way that you can check something and see is it correct or is it not correct is for you to understand what it should be, really. So we can start with the knowledge of the sections of the plan and what should be in each section so that you can look at your specific plan and see is what's in each section correct and accurate and as it should be. So the plan is divided into sections A through K, so alphabetically, and that's a lot. That's almost half the alphabet, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I would advise at this point, if you're listening and you have got a draft EHC plan in front of you and you're listening and you're thinking, right, I need help. How do I check this? I would suggest to just press pause at this time. Go and get your draft plan or get it up on your computer and then follow along with us as we go through each section. Some of the sections are more important than other sections, so we won't be going into detail on every section, but there's some sections that are really important. And I think the easiest way to do it is to have your plan next to you and then we can do just a follow along session. What do you think, Vic?
That is a fab idea. So now this is your opportunity to press pause, go get your draft EHC plan and follow along with us.
Okay, so hopefully everyone's back again with us and we'll get started.
Brilliant. Right, I've got my EHC, my draft EHC plan in front of me. Let's start at the very top. Let's start at the very beginning. It's a great place to start. What is section A, Laura?
Section A is super easy, so it's a great place to start. It is the parent and child's views. It is essentially what you have written when you wrote your parent views. And all of that just gets popped into the EHC plan because obviously it's really important for parents' views and child views to be represented. So this is just what you've written. There's not an issue, and I would just check it for errors because sometimes there's spelling errors or bits and bobs. if you want any of those things changed, they won't have a problem with that. So don't worry.
Pretty easy, that one then, Laura. Then let's go down then, section B.
Okay, section B is called My Special Educational Needs. And it is really, really an important section. So what is this saying? It's a description of your child's special educational needs. And what do you need to do? A bit of an overview. Just make sure all your child's special educational needs are included. And they need to be correct. So you don't want anything missed off. You don't want anything over or understated. It needs to be accurate. And you need to have correct detail. So you don't want things to be vague.
I remember this from some of our previous episodes about being specific.
Yeah.
Is it important to be specific?
Yes and no. Specificity comes more into section F, but well remembered, Vic. Let me give you an example. When I say make sure all your child's special educational needs are included, it means if your child's got a diagnosis of autism, don't just say they've got a diagnosis of autism. You need to kind of go into more detail than that, break it down. When we say don't over or understate things, it's really important to be accurate. So for example, let's say a child is nonverbal and actually that child is communicating in 1 or 2 word levels. Well, then saying the child is nonverbal is not accurate. Or at the same time, if you're saying the child understands 2 to 3 step instructions and actually that child is only understanding a 1-step instruction, again, that's understating their needs. So that's not accurate either. And when I spoke about not being vague, that really comes from saying a child with autism, they have communication difficulties. Oh, that's just vague. We don't know where they're at with that.
So we're still on section B, special educational needs. Anything else to check here?
The section is usually divided into subsections, so that might make it a bit easier for you to check. So it will be cognitive, so that's about learning needs, any sensory needs, physical, communication, interaction, behavior, social, emotional, mental health. So go into all those different sections and make sure that everything's right in there. If you're not sure, or if you're kind of thinking, I know they've got needs there, but I don't really know how to describe them, or what's the right word to use, or you're kind of stuck, go back to the professional reports for their descriptions. So, for example, any health reports. So if you've got a child with, a diagnosis of autism, what does it say on their ASD diagnostic report? Or perhaps there was a community pediatrician report, occupational therapy report, physiotherapy, anything medical, for example. Sometimes that's really hard to remember all the terms of what the needs are if they've got complicated medical conditions. All that's written in there. And obviously then all the education reports as well, your educational psychologist report and any school report. So go to them and make sure that all that's in there.
You said section B is important. It sounds really important, but why is it important?
It's kind of what the whole plan is based around. The reason that you've got a plan is because the child's got specific special educational needs and certain provision will need to be put in place for that. No spoilers, we will get into section F later. But if you don't know what a child needs or what their needs are, then other things aren't going to be correct further on. I just wanted to say now as well, it's really important to understand when you check this that you are looking for a description of needs, not what a child needs, if you get what I'm saying. So that can be a bit confusing. I've been confused myself sometimes at that point. So it's kind of the difference between saying that my child has severe communication difficulties and is nonverbal and they need a visual timetable. So the visual timetable is provision. They might need it, but that's not their needs. Here, what we're doing is describing the symptom. So you've got a headache, you've got a stomach ache, those are your needs, and the provision might be that you need a paracetamol or something. So keep that in mind, because sometimes I have come across with parents saying, oh, my child has autism and they need additional support with this. Another really good example with that would be, for example, explaining a child's continence needs, saying what they're able to do and what their difficulties are. That's what you're looking at, and leave what support they need for later on in the plan.
That's a really clear distinction, Laura. Any other points about Section B?
Before we move on, just wanted to make it clear that Section B is one of the sections of the EHC plan which can be appealed to the SEND tribunal.
So what's Section C and D all about?
Well, I've kind of put them together here because we're not going to go into massive detail on this now. Just like Section B summarises the special educational needs of your child, Section C summarises the health needs, and Section D summarises the social care needs of your child.
Section E is next, Laura. Can you take us through this one?
Yeah, so if you think about the plan, it does kind of make sense. First of all, it's an education, health and care plan. So we have summarised the education, health and care needs of the child. And then the next section is outcomes, targets. Okay, so we understand this child. What are we looking for? What outcomes do we want for this child? So let me just make this clear. In Section E, which is my outcomes, this section can't be appealed at the tribunal. But you still want it to be right because it's like having a target, you know what you're aiming for, you're understanding it. So it needs to be correct. So I would say have a look at them, be aware that there will be short-term targets. So let's say your child is in reception. You may have some targets that will be achieved by the end of Key Stage 1, but you may have quite a lot of longer term targets that might go on through the whole of the time they're in primary school. So that's fine, that's normal. One of the tips I always say is make sure that outcomes are SMART. So that is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So use that acronym. Have a look at your outcomes and just see if they make sense, really. You might be thinking, who's writing these outcomes? The EHC plan is informed by professional reports. So let's say it's your first EHC plan. It's more than likely that a lot of the outcomes are pulled from the educational psychologist report. So the targets, so a lot of what is in Section E will come from that. So that might be something else that you want to look at and check.
Let's move on a bit further down the form. We've got Section F next. Can you take us through Section F, please?
Section F is the big section. So I'd say go and get a cup of tea and strap in. So along with Section B, it's the most important part of the plan. And you'll see if you're a Manchester child, it says my special educational provision. So it is the part of the plan that lists the special educational provision required by the child or young person.
So this is where that distinction comes in with Section B. So what's the special educational provision?
What that means is it's anything that's going to be provided educationally for your child, which is different to more than what's usually provided for other pupils. So that's a really easy way of understanding it.
So this sounds to me like a list of what your young person's going to get from having the plan.
Yes, that's exactly right. So your child has got special educational needs, and what Section F is doing is detailing, okay, what are we going to put in place to meet those needs? What does this child need in order to be able to access education, learn and progress? Section F is also broken down into sections, a bit like Section B. So you've got cognitive learning section, communication, interaction, etc. So it's kind of the flip side of the coin to Section B. And when we spoke about it before, we could kind of see that you've got a need. So, okay, what's going to happen to meet those needs? And Section F, and this is the really important bit, is the legally enforceable part of the plan. So according to Section 42 of the Children and Families Act, the local authority has a legal duty to secure the special educational provision listed in Section F of a child's EHC plan.
So what does that actually mean, Laura?
Yeah, I know. You're thinking, what? What did you say then? But it's actually super important. So think about it this way. Whatever is listed in Section F, whatever is detailed in there that they've said, okay, your child needs this, the local authority has a legal duty in law to ensure that provision is being secured. And if it's not happening, then parents can challenge that.
So section F sounds really important to get right.
Yes.
So what should parents be looking out for when they're doing the filling out section F?
Okay, there's going to be a few bits here and kind of some of them might cross over with each other, but we'll just work our way through. So ensure that it's complete. All necessary special education provision should be included. So first way of checking that is, have all the recommendations made in the professional reports been included? When your child is going through assessment, for example, you'll have an educational psychologist report, there will be recommendations at the end of that. So it will say, this is the child and this is what they need. Those recommendations will be put into section F.
Laura, can you give us some examples of what parents should be looking out for?
For example, if it says in the educational psychologist report that your child requires a regular 10-minute movement breaks every hour, then that's what should be included. You need to make sure it's not left off. So you can't assume that it's going to be provided if it's not in section F. And it also needs to be specific. But let me just circle back before then. Perhaps even before your child was getting an education healthcare plan, so when they were on SEN support, let's say the school was already ensuring that your child had regular 10-minute movement breaks every hour. So it was already happening. So parents sometimes think, well, it was happening before. Everyone knows that he needs this. It's going to happen. It's fine. And they don't really think that it needs to be in section F. You need to just make sure that everything that your child needs is in there. And also, we need to make sure that it's specific.
Yes, the specificity. We know that being specific is really important, but what actually, you know what I'm going to say, Laura, what actually do you mean by that?
I feel like from previous episodes, I've really drummed home specificity. So you're just like having nightmares about it now. I'm glad that you remembered that, Vic. It is really important in section F. So let's just go back to our example. So if it says in section F, Laura must have regular movement breaks. Okay, I'm the child here. Think about it. This can be interpreted differently by different people. So I might say, okay, well, that's got to be once a day. Or they do have regular movement breaks because they have break time and lunch times. So that's fine. So what I said before, Laura must have regular movement breaks, is very different to Laura requires 10 minutes movement breaks every hour. As a rule of thumb, if you're thinking, is something specific, think about it this way. It should be clear what is being provided, by whom, for how long, and how often. There are some exceptions to that, and that should be only when flexibility is in the pupil's best interest, or if there's something that is kind of either there or not. So, for example, a visual timetable is something that just exists or doesn't exist. So you don't need to be specific of who does it and how long. It just needs to be there.
Okay, so we've checked that section F is complete and we've gone through it again and checked that it's specific. What happens next?
Again, this is kind of around specificity, but just watch out for weasel words such as access to, opportunities for, regular, which are vague. So for example, stating Vic will have access to small group working is very different to saying Vic will work in a small group of no more than 6 pupils daily for English and maths lessons. So again, this is about specificity, but it's just another tip about looking out for those words that they sound good, but kind of maybe don't mean anything.
I'm going to use the phrase weasel words from now on, Laura. How do parents know what information can be included and what's right?
As we said before, you can't just write the special education provision. It's not up to you to make up what's in there, and it's not up to the EHC team to make up what's in there. The EHC plan is guided, driven, and informed by professional reports. So there should be reports with the recommendations, and they will state what is required. So like we said before, the educational psychologist report, medical reports, diagnostic reports. For example, in the communication section, you might have recommendations from the speech and language therapist report, which is saying what that child requires. So make sure that all the recommendations are included in section F. And also, sometimes half the recommendation is included in section F. So you want to make sure that perhaps sometimes the whole recommendation comes over.
Whoa, lots of tips coming through for section F. Do you have any more?
Just a few dozen. No, we're coming kind of to the end of it. So think of it as section B and F as two sides of the same coin. So you've got a need. What provision is going to be in place to meet that need? So you can actually, some people would say they go through and they highlight a need in section B and then they look the same coloured highlighter in section F and what is meeting that need. That can be a way to make sure that nothing's missed off. I just also wanted to just say, just because it's complicated and there's always something extra, isn't there? But it's really important to mention that whilst section F is all about special educational provision and other things which aren't education might be in different sections of the plan, anything which educates or trains can also be included in section F. So let me give you an example. Speech and language therapy, that's health, isn't it? But it's clear that communication and speech and language is about education and training. So provision around speech and language therapy would be included in section F and it wouldn't be in the health section of the plan. Another thing, especially for the post-16 pupils, is travel training. So travel training is more about independent skills, but it is educating or training, and quite often that could be included in section F of the plan.
And finally on section F, let's reiterate how important this section is, Laura.
Yes, so don't forget, once the plan is finalised, as mentioned before, section F is legally enforceable, so you want to make sure that it's correct. It also means that it is another section of the plan that can be challenged at the SEND tribunal. So basically that means that when your plan is finalised, if you're still not in agreement with section F or you feel something's wrong or it's been missed off, you can appeal to the tribunal.
We're on the home stretch now, Laura. We've got section G and H after the big old F.
Yeah, we're going to just skirt through this because we're all exhausted now. So as we said before, section B, then section F. So G and H is the opposite side to section C and D. So we've got section C, which is my health needs, and section G is my health provision. So what would you need? And that won't relate to everyone. A lot of children don't have health needs, so that may well be blank in your plan. And on the other side of section D, social care needs, section H is social care provision. Now, just to make matters a little bit more complicated, it's divided into two sections, section H1 and H2, but I'm not going to go into this in detail here, but if you do need to know more about what should be in each section and what the difference between them are, I would suggest looking at the EHC EHC checklist. It's a fantastically useful document. It goes through all the sections of the plan and really briefly explains what should be in each section. So if there's anything that you haven't remembered from what we've gone on today, it's just a really good guide, a resource to just double check it. And it will go into the difference in H1 and H2. And obviously you can always come back to SENDIASS as well for more information.
And we'll be putting the link to the EHC website in the show notes for this episode as well. So section I remember way earlier, you said this is going to be blank.
Yeah. Section I is where the local authority will name the school, college, educational setting that your child will be attending. But yes, for a draft plan, it is blank, so no need to check it.
And don't worry that it's blank. Now we're on the last two sections, J and K. Let's start off with J, shall we?
Yeah, so this is easy. J is where you would write any details of any personal budgets, and this only applies to specific circumstances when your child is in receipt of a personal budget. Perhaps they aren't going to a school, so they're accessing education other than a setting, and there is another way that their education is being delivered to them. That will be detailed in section J. It is a very small minority. And section K is really just the list of all the reports that have informed the plan. So you can have a little look and say, okay, what reports, who's written them, what's been included in making this plan? And it's quite useful because when you're checking the plan, have a look. If you don't have a copy of the reports that you can see on the list, all you have to do is contact the EHCP team. You will have a linked case coordinator working with your child's school. So just ask them to give you a copy of that report, and then you can use that to check the plan.
Is that the end of checking the draft plan then, Laura?
Congratulations. Yes, you've checked your draft plan. That bit is done.
Is there an opportunity for me or our parents listening to name our preferred school on the form?
Yes, you will. There is a form that comes with the draft plan. So have a look for it. And in the form, there will be a section that says Parents Preferred School. So you also send that back to the EHCP team. We're talking about Manchester EHCP team processes. So that is specific to Manchester. It could be that other local authorities do that in a different way. So you've checked your draft. That's fantastic. Look at the form. The form does actually say, do you agree with the draft plan? Tick. Or if you don't agree with the draft plan, send amendments. If you don't agree, you want to make some changes, you tick that on the form, and then you will send your amendments back to the EHCP team. And then there's also a little section that says, what's your preferred school? So you have the chance, if you haven't already told them, because sometimes parents are in contact with the EHCP team and they've already been communicating about schools. But if you haven't already told them, just fill your school in there and send that back again.
This has just been so helpful as a follow-along guide to checking your draft EHC plan. Is there anywhere else we can find any more information about this whole process?
Yes, like I mentioned before, the IPSI EHC checklist is really, really useful. So definitely, I would say use that alongside checking your draft plan. And Manchester SENDIASS also has a fact sheet about EHC plans, which does go through all the different sections of the plan as well. So you can find that on our website.
And links to both of those, the SENDIASS Manchester website and the IPSI website, are in the show notes for this episode. And that's it for this episode. A big thank you for sharing your knowledge as ever, Laura, and a big thanks to you for listening and following along.
Do you have a question for us that you'd like us to answer on a future edition of the Frequently Asked Questions Send Talk podcast? If you do, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. Please send your question along with your name to our email, which is sendiass@manchester.gov.uk. And the email address is included in the show notes as well.
It certainly is. Thanks, Laura.